Hello, everybody. I am Ruth Rumack, and welcome to Raising a Reader. I'm going to give everyone a couple of minutes, a few more people just to join us this evening, but I would love to hear from you, our participants, to find out who you are, where you are, how old are the children that you're thinking about tonight? What are some, maybe one thing that you are hoping to gain from tonight's webinar? Go ahead and put that in the chat. And we'll just give our other guests a few minutes to arrive. I know it's difficult with bedtime and bath time and dinner time, but I would love to start the conversation with you. So if you feel like it, throw that in the chat. Tell me where you're from, tell me the ages of the kids that you're thinking about, and maybe one thing that you're hoping to learn or get out of tonight's information session. Who have we got here today? Let's see. I can tell you that. We've got Lori and Vista. Hello, welcome. You're our first two joiners today. It could be a very private conversation that we're having over the next hour. But since it is a private and intimate group, why don't we, chat about it? Let's chat about reading. That's what we're going to do. It's like a fireside chat. Lori and Vista, maybe you can share with me, how old are the kids that you're thinking about tonight? You can put that in the chat if you like. Or maybe oh, there we go. Lori says she's in Toronto. And what have we got? Kiddos in grade 2. We just had a session tonight. Oh, yay. That's exciting. That's wonderful. And Vista, tell me a little bit about your kids. How old's the child you're thinking of? All right, well, this is what I'm thinking. I'm going to launch into it. And if you have any questions as we go along, just throw it in the chat and we'll see where this takes us. All right. Lori says also, oh, I just lost that. Hold on one sec. What does Lori say? Lori says, would love to learn more about reading mastery. Not sure if that's in the program. Well, I wasn't planning on speaking about it tonight, but I can certainly talk about reading mastery and the sort of scope and sequence of it. And a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight is actually based on this idea of phonics, phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. So having an understanding of these basic foundation concepts is really going to help you understand why the reading mastery program is such a strong program and so effective. Yes. All right, let's see. I'm going at it. So that's me. For those of you who don't know me or know more about me, I am Ruth Rumack, and I'm the founder of Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. And we are an educational support center that was established way back, quarter of a century ago. And really, I started the business wasn't started as a business. It was started as me being a teacher looking to use my skills as a teacher. And I started working one-on-one with students, particularly who had reading challenges and other academic needs. And as a young teacher, 25 years ago, every time I encountered a new student with new challenges, I really was excited to dive into the research and the, what's effective and what's not effective, and how can I really help this individual get to the next stage in their learning. And as I did that for more and more students, and my students became more complicated, I guess I developed a reputation for taking on quite complicated cases. My expertise grew, and then I brought more people in to work with me and trained them. And now we have 2 locations, although still a lot of what we're doing pandemic wise is virtual, but we are back in person. Yay, thank goodness. And we are able to see a wide range of students with all types of needs, starting at age 3, all the way through to the end of high school and into university as well, into undergraduate programs. We do a lot of work with our high school students, preparing them for university and helping them make that transition to first or second year university in terms of executive functions, understanding how to take notes, how to study, how to use their time well, those types of things. So we're quite expert at working with all types of learners, all types of diagnoses, ADD, ADHD, different learning disabilities or differences, as I prefer to call them, working with individuals on the autism spectrum, etc. All right, let's move on to the next. So this is why we're here. We're here to talk about reading. And when we start talking about reading, we really have to begin with, how do children learn to read? How does that process of learning to read actually occur? And there was a panel called the National Reading Panel out of the States, and they surveyed hundreds and hundreds, like I think 1,000 different articles. And these were scientific articles, scientific publications based on reading. And they came up with something called the Big Five. And this Big Five they're progressive in nature. And they start with phonological awareness. I'm going to talk more in detail tonight about phonological awareness and phonics, which is the second step, moving on to vocabulary, and then you move into fluency, and then comprehension. These are the 5 stages that a child or an individual would go through in terms of learning how to read. And tonight we're going to focus on the first 2, phonological awareness and phonics. All right, let's move on to the next one. The thing about these Big Five is that they are progressive in nature. And generally you master one area, you gain skill in one area, let's say phonological awareness, and then that helps you build your skill in phonics. The phonics would then help you build your skill in vocabulary, and then moving on to comprehension and fluency, etc. So let's talk about that first word, phonological awareness. It's an umbrella term, and that term really just means understanding the different sounds in oral language. I like to think about it a little bit as mental gymnastics, the ability to hear a word or hear a group of sounds and be able to squeeze them together to make a word, or take an individual word and pull it apart into its separate sounds. So phonological awareness is that ability to recognize and manipulate sounds within words. Then we have 2 parts of that. And we can look at the word parts. So we might look at breaking something into syllables, looking at how things rhyme. Are the endings the same? That would be a rhyme. Looking at alliteration, are the beginnings the same? Also looking at words within a larger sentence. Then we're going to look at individual sounds, and those are the phonemes or phonemic awareness, the ability to hear the individual sounds in one word and be able to both spread them apart, so segment them, or to squeeze them together and blend them together. So as you can see from the graphic, that phonemic awareness is really about segmenting, pulling it apart, isolating a different sound, blending sounds together, so squeezing it all back together, and then playing with it, adding, subtracting, substituting different sounds, so that you really have that ability to manipulate the language. Now, keep in mind that phonological awareness is actually an oral skill. It's something that we do just by talking. It's not even getting to the print of reading yet, but we know that having those strong phonological awareness and phonemic awareness skills provides you with a very strong base to be a successful reader later on. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Okay, next slide. So here is a graphic of all the phonemes. The phonemes are the smallest units of sound, and these are the things that we put together to create words. And you'll notice, well, I'll ask you, what do you notice about the phonemes if you're looking at sort of from left to right and moving down the rows? Does anybody have a comment? What do you notice about that? All right, I'll give you a hint. I won't put you on the spot. If you notice, they're not in alphabetical order. And the interesting thing about phonemes is that we teach phonemes in a high frequency order. And there are certain sounds in English that come up more often than other sounds in English. I like to think about Wheel of Fortune. You guys know the game show Wheel of Fortune. You have to guess a letter that might be part of a larger puzzle. Nobody guesses X or Z on the first turn because they know that it's not a high frequency letter or sound. So when we look at all of these individual sounds, we see that certain ones come up first. So we want to teach those first, because if the majority of words are created with a smaller group of letters, if we can teach that first group of letters early, then a student will feel success because they're going to be seeing those sounds over and over again, and they're going to really consolidate those sounds before they move on to the next group of sounds. We also have in this graphic, you'll see sound combinations. So it's not just individual letters. It's also an AI makes the A sound, an EE makes the E sound, etc. So when we're teaching reading, we teach very explicitly each type of phoneme, and we teach the spelling that goes along with certain words, especially in English. And it's a complicated language where we have one word that sounds the same, but is spelled 2 or 3 different ways, and it has different meanings. But we still want to teach the individual sounds associated with those letter combinations. Okay, let's look at the next thing. So why is this building block? I call the phonological awareness and the phonemic awareness a building block. Why is it so important? Well, there has been decades of research, decades, 30 plus years, I would say, which shows us the role that phonological awareness plays in the acquisition of reading. And if we break it down and we think about it, you know, to understand and to be able to manipulate and hear the different sounds in language orally will, once we have made that connection between the symbol, let's say we have a symbol for S, and the sound S, when we see it in print, we're associating, our brain is then associating that symbol of the S with the sound S. And if we have an association for all the different symbols or combinations of symbols with different sounds, it allows us to use our mental gymnastics and take individual sounds, squeeze them together, and create words that we say out loud, but also words that we're reading off a page. So we know from a lot of research that there is a high degree of correlation between the amount of foundation skill or phonological awareness that you have and your ability. It predicts your success later on in terms of reading and spelling. We also know, I mean, not just from research, but from our own students, that many students that come to us with reading challenges often have very weak phonological awareness skills. And so if we can go backwards and we can fill in some of the gaps and teach them these phonological awareness skills, then we have a better chance of helping them consolidate their reading and move ahead faster. And unfortunately, you know, in the classrooms these days, that's just not happening. There isn't time. And especially for kids who are in grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, who have been in kindergarten, grade 1 or grade 2 over COVID, they may not have gotten that type of explicit instruction in the sound symbol correspondence, how the sound matches up with the symbol, and certainly not had enough time to play with phonological awareness skills. So the best part about phonological awareness skills is that they can be taught, and they can be taught to kids at almost any age. Even, you know, if you're a late reader or a struggling reader, you can be taught these phonological awareness skills even into adulthood. Practice the skill, and then that will help to strengthen your reading skills as you're learning to read. So one of the things that comes out of the research is that this predictor of long-term reading and spelling success. And I find it interesting, the quote talks about the fact that it actually, phonological awareness predicts your ability to read better than intelligence, vocabulary knowledge, and socioeconomic status. So it's interesting. There's a new study out called The Right to Read. And I'm so happy that finally the study was complete and that the findings have been shared, because it's saying what we have been saying all along, which is you really need this strong phonological awareness, phonics-based approach in order to give everybody the right to read. Some kids are going to pick it up quickly and easily, but those kids that will struggle or will have challenges with it really need this systematic approach. All right, questions before we go on. I'll tell you more about phonological awareness, but do we have any questions? I'm all yours, ladies. And just so you know, Vista, this is being recorded and it will be sent to you afterwards. Okay, anytime you have a question, pop it in the chat box. I'm going to keep my eye on the chat bubble. Let's look at the next slide. Okay, phonological awareness. So we've talked about the fact that it's a foundation skill. There are actually 5 skills within the phonological awareness continuum that will help your child become a stronger reader. And those skills start with rhyming. They move to blending, then alliteration, segmenting, which is pulling words apart, and then sound manipulation, which is playing with the sounds of language. And where is my book? Many years ago, probably about 10 years ago, well, more than that, about 15 years ago, I started a class called Alphamania. And I started this live interactive class with kids. We did it once a week, or we did it as a camp program where we did it 5 days in a row, where we were practicing and teaching specifically phonological awareness skills. And the reason that I created this class was because as I was working with kids who were in grade 3, grade 4, grade 5, who were really still struggling with reading, what I learned and what I realized is that if I had only had a chance to work with them when they were 3 and 4 and 5 years old, they may not have had to struggle so much in those later years. Because if I had had a chance to teach them clearly and explicitly and with intention and purpose, these 5 skills, rhyming, blending, alliteration, segmenting, and sound manipulation, they would probably not have had to struggle through those early years of primary junior school and then have to have remediation in the end. So Alphamania was a class that I started, but it wasn't enough because I felt that I could only reach the 10 or 12 kids that I could see each time that I ran a class. So we started a whole book series. And the Alphamania book series was there. It's a whole set of stories about pirates and these kids that live in Letter Lagoon, and they go on adventures. And each book deals with a different skill, foundation skill, the rhyming skill, the blending skill, etc. So this was my solution to reaching more kids at a time, and we're still reaching them, one book at a time and one class at a time. All right, let's look at the next one. So there they are. Those are my Alpha Maniacs. If you notice, they have the letters of the vowels on their t-shirts. They are named after the short vowel sounds: Alex, Eddie, Izzy, Ollie, and Umber. And in each book, they teach a different skill. Let's take a look at the next one. So here's a skill. The first skill that we want to teach under phonological awareness, that foundation skill, is rhyming. And you're probably very familiar with rhyming books, with a lot of finger play games, that you play with your kids when they were babies. They all have to do with rhyming. And part of that is because we want to kind of prime the ear for recognizing that 2 words or more than 2 words end in the same way. So we can do this with our kids at any age by just having, sort of questions, conversations, and playing games with them that are very low maintenance. You don't need a lot of stuff to play the games. You can even do it while you're in the car or waiting for a bus or taking a walk or having breakfast. But laying the foundation and practicing these skills on a regular basis will not only enhance their reading ability, but it will also help you determine what part of phonological awareness they are still potentially struggling with if they are having challenges with reading. So we have 2 parts of rhyming. The first part is to learn to identify the rhyme, knowing whether 2 words end with the same sound or not. And then the second skill, which is a little harder, is to generate your own rhyme. So some of the games that I would play or say, my wording is usually listen to the sounds at the end of the words. Are they the same? And then we talk about the word rhyme. It's a rhyme when 2 words end in the same way. So when I play the game, I usually play thumbs up or thumbs down. So I say, listen really carefully. Tell me if these 2 words have the same ending: lock and rock. And I also get the kids to watch my mouth, because often the visual of where I'm placing the sound in my face will help them to determine if I made the same shape in my face, then they know that they rhyme. If the 2 words rhyme, we put our thumbs up. If the 2 words don't rhyme, we put our thumbs down. So that's the identifying part. To generate your own rhyme is a little harder, because you have to now not only recognize what the ending of the first word is, but you also have to come up with another word, a different word. So remember that in all of these phonological awareness skills and games, nonsense words are accepted, because it means it doesn't have to be a real word to follow the rule of rhyming. You could say rock and puck. Well, that kind of is a real word. Rock and zock. So it doesn't matter as long as the endings are the same. We'll accept it, we'll celebrate it, we'll get excited, we'll high five, and we'll move on to the next one. Okay, let's look at the next slide. So here's a game that we play at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. It's a rhyming ball game. You can use a beach ball, a small ball. So basically, we toss the ball back and forth, and each time we catch it, we have to say a word that rhymes with whatever starting word we've started with. So if I would say, I say cat, I throw it to my partner, you say, and they fill in bat. And then they will throw it back, and then I'll add another word, and we keep going until either we drop the ball or we run out of words. We can't remember, we can't think of any more rhymes. Let's look at the next one. Oh, just going back to more rhyming games. I mean, there's so many, and we're actually going to send you a handout after the presentation that will give you a whole bunch of different games that you can play for each one of these skills. And another one we like to do is called the rhyming tower, where we're using blocks, and we put one block down and say a word, and then another block and another block. And again, you see how high you can make it, and you also see how many rhyming words you can get out of one base word. Okay. Alliteration. Alliteration is recognizing that the beginnings of the words are the same. And again, you know, nonsense words are accepted. We want them to be, sometimes we want them to be real words, but if that's as far as the child can get at that moment, that's okay too. So I might say, do these words start with the same sound? Or does your mouth make the same shape at the beginning of each word? So we will be very specific. Telescope, turtle, turkey. Look at my mouth, it's making the same shape. And then again, we're identifying first, and then we get to generating our own. So I'm going to say two words that start with the same sound. Bell, box. Can you think of another word that starts with a B sound? B. And I'm being, again, intentional and very clear so that the student can see the differences between the sounds. Especially students who have challenges with phonological awareness, it is very difficult for them to hear the difference between certain sounds, certain vowel sounds. For example, ah sounds very similar to eh, which would sound similar to I. So it's hard to identify and make up new words if you're having trouble discerning between the sounds. All right, let's move on to the next one. So here's an alliteration game that we play in our car. Still, my daughter has just turned 13, and when her cousin gets in the car, this is a game I've played with them since they were 2 years old, and they still ask me to play the game. So we say we're going on a trip, and you think of things to pack for your trip that all begin with the same sound. So I'm going to pack a car, and then the next person says cash or candle. You can also reverse it by having you say three words that have the same sound at the beginning, and then you have the student fill in the next one, or the child fill in the next one. There are many variations, but it's something that, you know, is fun for trips because it takes a long time, and you can put all different types of parameters on it if you want to. The other thing you can do is use it as a memory game. So if, you know, we go around the car, everybody says a word, then you have to say all the words that came before yours, which is good for my memory too. All right, let's look at the next one. Blending is the third skill on phonological awareness. And phoneme blending is the idea of taking individual sounds in a word, saying them really slowly, and then saying them fast. And this is something that we see in the reading mastery program all the time. That's what it's built on, where the teacher will, you know, highlight with the finger the sound, the letters. There are little dots under the letters in reading mastery, and you put your finger on the dot, and as there's an arrow, it tells you to slide to the next sound, and you keep saying that sound until you get to the end, and then you go back and you say it fast. So it would look something like sun. Say it fast, sun. So that's something that in reading mastery, you're using the actual reading letters. But when you play these games orally, you don't need to write them down. You just need to listen. So again, you can play them anywhere. When my daughter was very young, I played a lot of phonological awareness games with her. partly as an experiment because, I wanted to try out all of the things that I had been researching and learning for so long, and partly because I wanted her to have strong skills. And, I think she was naturally primed for it, but starting these phonological awareness skills so early, she was actually quite an early talker. And she learned to read at the average, in between sort of age 5 and age 7, she kind of consolidated. But she enjoyed the games and she asked for them and we played them, and it was very low stakes. And I could see her skills building over time, which was really encouraging. And I could see that, in over a few weeks span, she would get to a sort of plateau. We would practice or try the next level up. It would take a couple of weeks for her to consolidate that next skill, and then she would move to the next level. Yeah, so that's the idea of saying it slowly and saying it fast. We often talk about saying it in a stretchy way and then shrinking it back together. All right, let's look at the next one. So here's a game for blending. It's a song, and you'll probably know the tune. So I would put a bunch of mystery objects in a bag or in a box with a lid or anything that you can't see into. And you want to make sure that all the objects in there are, maybe just two to four different sounds. And you're going to sing, if you're sure you know my word, yell it out. If you're sure you know my word, yell it out. If you're sure you know my word, then tell me what you've heard. If you're sure you know my word, yell it out. And then we'll pull out an object and say it very slowly, rock. And then the child can guess what I've said. And it's really funny because when I tell a student to say it fast, somehow, and it's pretty consistent at the beginning when I'm teaching new students, they'll say it loud as opposed to fast. So if I say rock, and then I say your turn, say it fast, they'll say, shout it out, rock. And it's funny, it makes me laugh. And over time they learn it's not just being loud, it's also being fast. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So the next skill is segmenting, which means pulling a word apart. And we can do that in many different ways with one word. We can do it in syllables, so dividing it into its bigger parts, or like a word like baseball, we've got 2 syllables, 2 parts, baseball, rabbit, jumping, etc. Just so that we're clear, a syllable is a part of a word that you can push out in one breath. So if you put your hand in front of your mouth and you say baseball, you'll feel almost 2 puffs of air. The other trick about syllables is that a syllable can only contain 1 vowel sound. So in our other reading program, like Wilson Reading System, we talk a lot about syllables and being able to divide up the syllables. And so when you understand that a syllable is 1 puff of air or 1 group of letters that contains 1 vowel sound, it helps to break the word up when you're learning unfamiliar words or when you're decoding unfamiliar words. Okay, let's look at the next one. So here is a game, phoneme segmentation. So we want to say the individual sounds. Like I said, you can break a word into its many ways. You can break it into 2 syllables. You could break it into the onset and the rhyme, which is the beginning part, like the beginning sound and then everything else. Or you can take it to the phoneme level, which is individual sounds. Now, understanding phoneme segmentation, breaking it into its phonemes, is super, super duper important for spelling. Because when you are going to write the word, let's say map, you have to think first in your head, what's the first sound? Okay. And then you have to go and figure out what symbol do I have to write for the sound Then you have to go to the next sound, ma, ah, all right. So I know the ah is the letter A, and you write the symbol for A, and then you continue through your word. So this is where the idea that these base or foundation skills have so much impact for later reading and spelling becomes very clear when you start to pull it apart and look at the individual parts of it as we're putting it back together. Okay, so what else can I say? Some phonemes, as we saw from that bigger chart, are more than 1 letter, but it's still only 1 sound. That's like SH together says sh. that would still be considered one phoneme because it's only one sound. And then we have something called an R-controlled vowel, which you may know from reading mastery. The R-controlled vowel is where you have an AR, an OR, an ER, or an IR that also, again, makes one sound. And we teach the R sound individually as one sound. All right, let's look at the next one. So here's a game for segmenting. You can decorate something like a treasure chest. You're going to cut a hole in the lid. We do this with our kids all the time. They love it. We put a few objects in there that have 1, 2, or 3 syllables. A child will reach in, they'll pull something out. There's always this mystery of pulling something out. You don't know what it is. And then you clap out the syllables. So if I pull out, let's say, I'm looking around, a pencil. If I pull out a pencil, then I'm going to clap pencil. If you want to do something that's more advanced, then you move to the phoneme level and put things in there that are 2 or 3 or 4 phonemes. Let's say they pull out let's say a book. No, that would be too big. Let's say a cow, because maybe a little toy cow. Then you're going to think about the different sounds, the k and the ow that come out of it. Okay, let's look at the next one. Dun, da, da. So last one out of the 5 would be sound manipulation. This is the hardest one. And the order that we teach these progressively get more challenging and more difficult. And I find sound manipulation is even difficult for some adults when we haven't practiced it and we haven't thought about it for a while. So this is that mental gymnastics of being able to understand the whole word and then break it down into its parts, rearrange the parts, and then come up with something different. For example, we might say hook, take the word hook, take away the h, and add a b. What word do you get? So the children have to think through each of those parts and you come out with the word book. Another one would be, let's say, changing the beginning sound. You might change the end sound. You might change the middle sound. And again, the more you play these games, the easier it gets and the stronger the skill becomes. So that would be sound deletion, would just be saying a word without a certain sound. Let's say the word jet without the j. So they have to think, okay, jet, take away the j, what's left? Et. You could do the same thing with deleting the end sound or deleting the middle sound. Again, they progressively get more challenging, but the more you practice, the easier it gets. Let's look at the next one. So sound manipulation game, you could gather a bunch of toy animals or pictures and you call out the name of the animal with either the first or the last sound missing. So you might say, this is an zebra, and they have to look at what you have out on the table and point to or choose the animal that you're talking about. The thing about sound manipulation is that when you delete, in order of progression, deleting the first sound is easiest. Then you would delete the last sound. Deleting the middle sound is the most difficult. So that's always the last thing that we practice. Okay, what's next? So phonological awareness, the big picture, understanding its importance, it should be part of an early child's life. If we've, if we're still struggling with reading, spelling, etc., it's never too late to learn that skill. And it's never too late to practice the skill and to play with the skill in a fun, low stakes kind of way. The other thing is that when we do see students that have phonological awareness challenges, we know that they most likely will have challenges with reading, and therefore we can be proactive and get in there and give those kids the skills that they need early before it becomes too late. Or again, when you know that that someone has weak phonological awareness, we can go in and build those skills no matter what their age. It leads to future spelling success. And just in general, it encourages a joy for language because it's fun. It's fun to play with these sounds, and it's fun to come up with silly sentences and silly rhymes and, just be creative with the language. One of the things that, I'll come back to you in a second, Lori. One of the things that I always found really encouraging when I did the Alpha Mania classes is that Usually after the third or fourth class, especially when we would always do syllabication, we would always do some blending, we would always do some segmenting in each class. We were sort of building the skills as we moved along. When we got to the syllabication part, the parents would come to me and say, I don't know what you're doing in there, but all of a sudden my child is clapping out everybody's name or clapping out, the things that they see on the street. So I would always jump for joy and think, oh my gosh, it's working. It's working because they're taking in what we're doing in class and they're using it. They're manipulating it. They're practicing and they're playing and they're enjoying it. And that was really my intention in the first place, was to get kids to love language and become great readers and enjoy a love of reading later on. Okay, I got a question from Lori. Do difficulties with specific skills like rhyming or sound manipulation point to particular learning differences, or do all of these tend to go together? Well, that's a good question. A child, an individual, can, in the scope of phonological awareness, be better at certain things than others. Does one thing lead to something other, like very specific on the learning differences side? Not necessarily. It really depends because something like blending and segmenting are one and the same. One is taking the word and breaking it apart. That's the segmenting part. And the other one is taking parts of the word and squeezing it back together. So sometimes a student will be really good at blending the sounds, but not so good at segmenting. But again, it's a skill that we can work on. And so if we've worked on the skill enough, and it might take a really long time to perfect that skill or to make it part of what a child can do without as much effort. But all of those things together will lead to strengthening those skills. So you're asking, do difficulties in specific areas like rhyming or sound manipulation point to particular learning differences? I can't say that if you have a rhyming challenge, you're going to have this kind of learning difference. I think that they really do all work together. And you need all of them to be working in tandem in order to have those strong reading skills and spelling skills later on. I hope that answers your question, Lori. If you want to follow up with another question, go ahead, stick it in the chat. Okay, let's look at the next slide. We're taking a moment, but I don't have my notes in front of me. So what am I taking a moment? I think I'm asking, I actually wanted to open up the chat and ask about, how do you remember learning how to read? What are your recollections? Do you remember just opening a book and it kind of coming together, or was it really challenging? Do you remember a specific strategy that you used? I'm very curious. Joelle's helping me out. Was it through whole language, which is learning individual words as a whole, basically memorizing those words? Or was it breaking the words down phonetically the way that we've been talking about? Anybody have a comment? Or generally, how many of you actually enjoy reading and do it for pleasure or to relax or to escape? Any comments? I know from my experience, I learned to read using a phonics system. And I still remember my grade 1 teacher teaching us, Mr. Muggs. This was in the 70s, and it was a whole series of books, phonics books, and it was very deliberate. It was very explicit, and we just progressed through the different pieces. But I do remember being much younger, and I was starting to catch on to what reading was, and for some reason, I was very stubborn. And I said, my mother was trying to teach me to read early because she could see that I was getting it. And I said to her, Mommy, I am not going to learn to read from you. You are not a teacher. I'm waiting till I get to kindergarten. So at that point, she was like, okay, fine, whatever. It'll all happen at a certain time. So, I remember that way. What happened in the 80s was that the pendulum swung the other way, and that teachers started using a whole language approach, which was basically teaching the whole word, and students were required to memorize that. The problem with whole language is that it does not teach you how to break things down into its smaller parts. And therefore, when you encounter words that you've never seen before or you've memorized, you don't have any skills to be able to break them apart to create a new word or a new sound. It also helps or is a hindrance to spelling because, again, you're not aware of the individual sounds that make or spelling patterns that make certain sounds. I remember speaking to a parent a few years ago who said to me, I learned to read with whole language. And she said, and it was really a detriment to me because even to this day, when she tries to read, places on a map or unfamiliar names, or if she's reading, something scientific, she says she has a hard time figuring out how to pronounce new words because she doesn't have those phonological awareness skills. So I found that really interesting. And she was a very accomplished, very educated adult, but she herself recognized that she was missing some things in her reading skills. All right, let's look at the next one. Wonderful, where are we at? Okay, back to it. So we've talked about phonological awareness. These are the foundation skills, these 5 things: rhyming, blending, segmenting, manipulating sounds, etc. And now we move on to phonics. And phonics is where we are taking all those phonemes, those word parts, those individual pieces, and we're putting them together into one bigger piece. So I like the graphic. It's like all the ingredients of the pizza, those are the phonemes and the word parts. But when we put them all together, that allows us to use our phonics and to decode words, which means break those words down in written form to be able to read. So let's look at the next step. So phonics has a progression of sounds, and we look at the first part of it is your short vowel sounds. So at this point of phonics, we are expecting that our students have what's called the sound symbol correspondence, that they know the symbols and they know the sound that those symbols make. I don't think I said it before, that knowing the letters of the alphabet is not the same as knowing the sounds that those letters make. And a lot of parents will say to me, well, my child knows all the letters of the alphabet, they should be ready to read. Why aren't they reading? They know their alphabet. And I have to step back and say it's not about just knowing the letters, because the letter names don't actually help you sound out anything. If you have the word cat and you call that a letter C, that letter C doesn't actually help you pronounce the sound of a k. So it's tricky. So the first thing we want to know is that our students have their short vowel sounds, a, e, I, and that we can put them together with consonants, simple consonants, and we get something called a CVC word, or a consonant vowel consonant word. That's our first step. And from there, we introduce digraphs where we have 2 letters that come together to make one sound, like SH makes the sound sh. Then we move on to blends. We have a whole bunch of different blends. We have L blends, so consonants blended or squeezed together with an L, an R blend, another consonant with an R after it, an S blend starts with an S and has another consonant after it. And then final blends, which are the blends that happen at the end of the word. So you're thinking, well, why can't we just sound these out? Why do we need to teach them individually? When we teach them individually, a child really understands and is able to recognize them as like a group, like a solid something that comes together. And they don't waste time pulling them apart, trying to keep the sounds individual. They say them as one nice sort of fluid. It helps with fluency, basically, where you're not stopping to figure out each individual letter, especially if you know that certain letter combinations come together and you know what they say. Then the last step we get to is the silent E, or the consonant vowel consonant with an E at the end. And that is another rule, because we have to teach that silent E, I always say, it gives its power to the vowel and it makes the vowel say its own name. But for a lot of students who don't pick that up just by noticing and by listening and hearing, that they need it to be explicit. So we have to teach the rule and practice that rule. All right, let's look at the next one. There's more. That's not all of it, but that's sort of the beginning stages of the phonics side of things. Many different rules, lots of rules have exceptions, we know in English, but when we teach the most common rule, it gives our students a path to follow, and it gives them confidence and success. So again, you know, we use a lot of different resources, and but I found that the resources that were out there just weren't meeting our needs. I needed something for kids who maybe were a little bit older, grade 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe even grade 5, who were not yet reading at their grade level. And I found that so many of the early decodable readers, meaning readers that had controlled vocabulary so that a student could actually sound out the words at their proper stage, there just wasn't anything. So we made our own. We made a series of books called the Yak Pack. And we have 2 sets of them. One is the Phonics set, as you can see in front of you. And these are our lovely, beautiful, brand new covers. These are my old covers, but we're doing a revamp. And it's a whole comic book set up like a graphic novel. And it is all controlled sounds. So that means that we're teaching a very specific spelling and reading pattern in progression with a scope and sequence. And we want to make sure our students are mastering that before they're moving on to the next thing. But the reason that we made a comic style with lots of fun illustrations was because we found that there just wasn't anything for that older student who wasn't yet reading at their grade level. All right, I'm going to go back to, let's see, what else do we have? Nope. Okay, I'm back at the chat, but I can't seem to find, oh, there we go. Pardon my, my technical skills. Let's see here. Oh, Lori says, my son loves these, so great for self-esteem. Thank you, Lori, because that's exactly why we created them, because they start off slowly and then they build and you really get a sense of confidence as you have mastered, you know, all you need to master is the small set of consonants and just one vowel sound, and you can read a whole story. And it makes our kids' days when they're excited. Maybe they haven't actually had the experience of reading independently yet. This allows them to do that. Okay, let's look at the next one. So this is just some more examples. And the other things that we put in the books was at the end of every story, we have an ability to check for understanding. So we do a little bit of reading comprehension. And then we always put in those phonological awareness skills, assuming that they still need some practice and or just for fun. Because again, the more you practice them, the easier they get and the more your confidence soars. And they're funny. The stories are really funny. I get a chuckle when I read them still. All right, let's look at the next one. So what else have we got? Here is an example from the consonant vowel consonant with the silent E. And it, again, is checking for comprehension and filling in those phonological awareness skills. But you'll see in the difference between these comics, which are from the last book, book 4, and the page we just saw, you'll see that the length of the words has increased, the length of the sentences have increased. There are more words in each comic box. So progressively, our students are able to read more fluently, and they're also able to read more independently. All right, let's move on to the next one. So some phonics activities. We at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space love to be active, and that idea of kinesthetic learning and moving, keeping the brain busy and the body busy and everything is working together. It's not just something we made up. It's actually based on a lot of scientific research of how the brain works and how we acquire new skills and our memory. So we like to get our kids up and moving. One game that we play, it's a favorite at the office, is the egg scavenger hunt. And luckily it's almost Easter. So any dollar store that you go into, buy yourself an extra pack of those plastic eggs. And we play all kinds of games. Sometimes we hide individual words that we're practicing with a particular spelling pattern in the egg. We'll hide it around the office. The child will go and collect the eggs and then open them all up and then read the words. Sometimes if they're more advanced, we might put a sentence in each egg and then they have to put the story together. You know, these are ideas that, you know, your child will also come up with new games and new ways to play these games. But to get them active, it's not just, especially when you have a struggling reader, it's not just about you must sit down at this desk and you must read this right now. We have to be creative as the adult. We have to find ways of luring that child into the excitement of the story and the reading. Especially when a child has been struggling for a long time, it's not pleasant. They've already associated reading with something that's negative or doesn't feel good. So we have to change that. We have to give them an opportunity to feel excited, engaged, and that they're almost, they're running the show in some ways, not always, not in all ways, but we have to give them some power back in order to have them trust us, but also want to continue to progress and to move forward. Another one that we do is hopping on a giant bouncy ball. And when our offices are full and buzzing, you would see kids jumping on giant bouncy balls up and down the halls all day long. So I might say to my students, I'm going to give you a word like trip. You have to hop for each sound that you hear. It, and they do. Or they might, I might get them to, I might put words on the wall and then they have to bounce to the first word and read it, and then bounce to the next word and read it, etc. So anything that we can do to get our kids moving and engaged, we do it. Next, let's look at the next slide. Okay, lightning round. This is where I can open it up for questions. And I see Althea has joined us. Hi, Althea, nice to have you here. If you have any questions, let's put them in the chat right now, and I will answer any questions that you've got if they haven't been answered already. Anybody got anything for me? What have you got? What have you got? I'm throwing a lot of information at you, and my hope is that you'll pull a few things from it that are interesting, that make sense, that perhaps you can use in your own home, something that you haven't thought of before. Okay, I will, if anybody has any questions as we go along, like I said, just throw them in the chat. All right, let's move on to the next one. Okay, so we've spent a lot of time talking about phonics and phonological awareness. And but there is still there's a missing piece, and that missing piece is the idea of sight words. So sight words are the most frequently used words in the English language. These are, our utility words or our service words, things like and, the, to, he, you. Many of them cannot be sounded out. The word, for example, let's say, THE is a really weird word to sound out. We just need to know it. We need to recognize it by sight and be able to say it without having to sound it out or to stop to sound it out. Some can be sounded out, but not all. So we do, in tandem with teaching the phonological awareness and the phonics and the individual sounds and their symbol correspondence, we do teach the sight words, because having a bank of sight words allows you to be more fluent. It allows you to recognize that word as a whole in the middle of the sentence, and it increases your fluency and it increases your speed. So we teach those together. So what did we do? Well, we added that to the Yak Pack. So we have a Yak Pack Phonics and we have a Yak Pack that is all about sight words. And I love the way we've done it, because again, it really, you're going to see a picture of it in a moment. It really encourages confidence, and it encourages pride in your reading ability. And you only, in this book, need to learn 2 sight words to read a whole story by yourself. And I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Okay, let's look at the next slide. So there it is. There are actually about 220 to 250, depending on which list you refer to, of these high frequency sight words. And we've created the Yak Pack Comics, which span the first 100. So we've completed the set for half of those high frequency words. But even with those 100 high frequency words, you're still going to get a lot of bang for your buck, because those words are going to be in everything that your child reads, in, from the shortest, smallest story to longer texts as well. So let's take a look at the picture, because it'll show us what I'm talking about. Next. There we go. So what we did was we we're teaching specifically the words in the very first story of book 1, the and. And every other word in the story has a pictogram, and then the word is written underneath. So if the child can sound out that word, then they're welcome to. If they can't sound it out, then they have the picture that helps them figure out what the sentence is saying. And again, what I find is that once you start to build that bank of words, their confidence just goes through the roof. And I can, it's been my honor and my privilege actually to be there when so many kids get to read their first story independently, and they are just so excited. They basically burst out of the room and run down the hall to show their parents, look what I did, look what I did. So the first graphic is from the first book, and the second graphic is from a later book, where you see we've got a bigger bank. So we're actually reading more words, and the pictographs are representing fewer. Okay, let's look at the next one. In the sight word books, we also have some letter recognition or some tracing of the sight words, so that they're practicing kinesthetically, not just to read it, but actually to make those letters and to look at the spelling pattern, as well as some additional reinforcement and games and all sorts of things that we make suggestions for. Okay, let's look at the next one. So here are some sight word activities that you can do at home. You want to, again, follow the progression from a trusted set of sight words. So either we use the Dolch words. There's also a list called Frye, F-R-Y-E, I believe. You can, Google 200 most common sight words, and I'm sure you'll get lots of different variations of the same combinations of words. But again, you want to choose the words that you know your child is going to come up against frequently. And when we do our activities, we want them to be as hands-in or as kinesthetic as possible. So using Play-Doh, plasticine, anything that you can get, your hands in, you roll the letter out, you put it onto the page, onto a piece of paper or cardboard, and then you trace it with your fingers. So there's a lot of tactile reinforcement going on. Another game we play is a memory match. So we have once we've got a bank of maybe 5 or 6 different words, we're going to make a short board and then start matching the words. This is the trick, that when you play a game like this, you get the student to read all of the cards, whether they match or not. So they're actually practicing without thinking that they're practicing. We're very clever. We're very sneaky. And then we can make an extension by asking them to use that word in a sentence so that we know that they know the meaning and how it's used within the context. Okay, let's look at the next one. So there are our resources. We've got our Alphamania Adventures books. We've got our sight word comics. We've got our comics and phonics. All of these are available through our website, but also on Amazon. And you can just type in Yak Pack, you'll find them if you're interested. This has been a labor of love for many years. They are created by our teachers based on research. And I'm really, as I said, happy to say now that Right to Read panel has come out and is in support of phonics once again. Yay! So hopefully we're going to see a little bit more of it in the classrooms over the next couple of years. I'm hoping. But regardless, we do it all the time. So you can always check with us, come to us. All right, let's look at the next one. This is what we do. We do one-on-one support. We do direct instruction. We use multimodal learning, as I've been explaining. We use activities, all kinds of stuff. If you have questions, I know, Laura, you're already with us, but if you have any questions or you want to know more about what we do, just reach out, contact us, ruthrumac.com. What else? I'm going to open this up for questions. I don't think there are any more slides. Are there, Joelle? Let's see. Yep, we're good for questions. Okay. So what have you got? I would love, before you all disappear, if you could write in the chat, is there one thing that you are walking away with tonight? Is there one new piece of information or something that I've reminded you about or something that you are still yet interested in? But I would love to get some parting comments from you before we wrap up. Anybody? Oh, wow, we've got some good ones. Okay. Lori says this was very helpful. All of these things are mentioned in our summaries we get each week. Now I know what it all means. Yay. Oh, good, Lori. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And, it's funny, as as teachers, we kind of get in our own head. Sometimes we use a lot of teacher speak. And even though we try and explain it to the parents, 2 or 3 minutes at the end of a lesson just isn't enough time to give you a really good big picture overview. So I'm really glad that you came and you were able to ask questions, and hopefully the next time you get an overview, or you can read your past emails and you'll be like, oh, now I know, I get it. Wonderful. Let's see. I had to ask, what the heck is a dolch word? Okay, so dolch is the individual, the guy, I think it was a man, pretty sure it was a man, who came up with this list of these 220 high frequency words. So his last name was Dolch, and they became known as the Dolch words or the Dolch lists. That's it. That's all it is. I know, it's such an odd, yeah, it's an odd word. You're right. When I think about it, if you wouldn't know what it was, it would seem really strange. Yep. Well, thank you. Thank you for reminding me about that. Anybody else? Who else has a question or a comment? What else are you taking away from tonight? I can tell you that, it's always wonderful for me to have a chance to connect with either current client parents or potential student parents, or just parents who are genuinely interested in having more information about reading so that they can pass that on to their kids. I think it's fabulous. We do a number of webinars every year. We do webinars not just on reading, we do them on math, we do it on executive functions, which are the set of skills that you need to function in the world in terms of memory, time management, sequencing, all sorts of things. And a lot of our students who do have learning challenges do have challenges with executive functions as well. So it's something really great. We just did our webinar on executive functions last week, I think 2 weeks ago. So if there's anything that you want to know more about, you can always go back to our library of webinars, and they're all recorded, and we have a YouTube channel. You can just check them out there. Or if you have specific questions, do not hesitate to call the office, 416-925-1225. We are always happy to have a chat, to explain things, to give you some guidance or perspective. Like I said, I've been doing this for a long time, and we have a lot of experience and a lot of expertise under our belts that we'd like to share. So if does anybody else have any other questions? If we have no other questions, then I am going to say thank you so very much for joining us. And I hope that you will join us for our next webinar. Oh, Althea has a question. I might have missed this. How do you encourage reading for early teens? We didn't talk about older kids. Okay. I'm good to stick around for a little bit. So how do we encourage it for older teens? I think it's funny. I mean, we're getting to this place. We have so many distractions, and there's so much screen time, and there's so much pull to devices. It's challenging to get our kids off of devices and onto an actual book that they hold in their hand and that they open up that has paper pages. There are many ways to encourage your kids to read as they get older. One of the things that I like to say is to have a family reading time. So that can take many forms. It could be, a dedicated time where you're all reading the same book together. For example, I have a much older son, he's 29, and I have a 13-year-old. And for many years, the two of them, they have a special Harry Potter bond, and that they read the books together, just the two of them. And my younger daughter would really look forward to those moments when her older brother was going to read Harry Potter to her. And that was like something that they really connected on over a number of years. And that having a family time where you do a family book is a nice idea. Something, if you have different ages, you have to find something that everybody's going to be interested in. Another way of doing it is really just like going to a bookstore. You could do it online, sure, and just peruse what is out there. What are some things that you think your kid might be interested in? And or go to the library or go on the library website and bring home a few different things from different genres. Read the first page or first few pages, the first chapter, see what sparks their interest. Or if you know that they have a particular interest in something, then bring a few books that are based on that theme so that they can choose. I think if our kids see us reading books, they are more apt to sit down and read with us too. You know, in school, they do something called DEAR, or drop everything and read. That's the acronym. Where everybody in the classroom, or sometimes the whole school does it for like 15 or 20 minutes. Often they do it like right after lunch. So one of the things that we encourage is do a DEAR at home, where you say, okay, you know, on a Sunday afternoon at this time, we're dropping everything and everybody's gonna pick up their own book or magazine and article, whatever it is, and read it for 15 or 20 minutes. It's part of that kind of habit. We kind of lose that habit. You know, we read to our kids a lot, often when our kids are little at bedtime, and then when they start putting themselves to bed, we lose that. And I like to encourage it. I also like to encourage a family book club where you'll all read the same book individually, and then you come together and you discuss it. And maybe have a pizza night or have a themed night based on the themes of the book. Something that celebrates the fact that you finished it or celebrates the fact that you started it. Who knows? But just something that we can make an event around. I hope that gives you some clues. Lori says she's got to run, it's bedtime, but she thanks us and she appreciates the webinar. So thank you, Lori. I'm glad that you joined us. Anybody else have any other questions? No. All right. Thank you so much for being with us. And I look forward to seeing you again. And what is our next webinar, Joelle? Do we know? I don't think we're done yet. We usually have a couple more before the end of the year. Give her a thought. One in May. Okay, good. Learning outdoors. Oh, I love that one. That one is so much fun. That's a really good one. So stay tuned if you've got little ones like primary, junior kids. And if not, even if you have older kids, you can take this if you go to the cottage or you go to a conservation area, you go out to a park for the afternoon. There are lots of activities that you can do that encourage reading, both in the math, the science, the reading, writing aspects of things. So we've got lots of good suggestions. And Althea says, thank you as always, Ruth. Love these sessions. Oh, I'm so glad. And again, I'm so glad that you joined us. All right, everybody, have a good evening. Bye-bye.